Welcome to the wonderful wizard guide. So we're going to go through what wizards get, what good choices we can make, what they're good for, what weaknesses they have, and so on. So we're going to pick a class that's going to be wizard, since that's what this video is all about. I'll go through the spells in a second. I'm just going to go to the bottom. Let's go to class features first. So as a wizard, it shouldn't be very surprising. We get spell slots, we can cast spells. Clue's kind of in the name. We get intelligence and wisdom saving throw proficiencies. The wisdom is useful, very good, because there are lots of nasty control spells that force wisdom saving throws. Intelligence saving throws really don't come up very often, but it's kind of a case of when they do, you really want to be passing them. And then we get dagger, quarterstaff, light crossbow proficiency. These don't really come into play very much, unless we're maybe using a light crossbow before level 5. And then we get Arcane Recovery. You can replenish expended spell slots while out of combat. I'll show you that later, but basically, yeah, we can actually get some spell slots back. And then we come to the spells. I feel like a lot of this video, the first part especially, will be about talking which spells are good and which aren't so good. Of course, you're always free to pick whatever spells you want. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just going to give you a guide to what usually works out well and what doesn't, and what are the pros and cons of different spells. So we're going to start with cantrips. We can cast these at will as many times as we want. Acid Splash is an area of effect spell that does 1d6 acid damage if enemies fail a dexterity saving throw. I say enemies, it's actually all creatures, so if your allies are in the area, they will also be hit. I don't often take this at the beginning. This 1d6 isn't very high, and the dexterity saving throws are usually quite easy for enemies to pass, but maybe once we get to level 5 it's a slightly better option. Blade Ward, I wouldn't usually pick this. The resistance to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage only lasts for 2 turns. It's not concentration at least, but it only lasts 2 turns, which just isn't enough, and during combat you're much better off attacking an enemy, really. Chill Touch, this is a good spell. So it does 1d8 necrotic damage. Although it says Chill Touch, its range is 60 feet. It's a bit strange. And if you hit it, you also prevent it from regaining hit points. There's one particular enemy, the Lava Elemental, where this works beautifully for. Other enemies do heal hit points. It's hard to tell exactly when they'll do it, but it's still, it's a nice spell. And Undead also receive disadvantage on attack rolls. There aren't too many undead enemies around, but it's still nice. Dancing Lights, I'm going to compare this to Light, kind of both at the same time. They both provide light. Dancing Lights lets you put down, well, some light, a light source in a particular place, but it requires concentration, which is a real downside to it, really. Whereas Light, you can, infuse an object with an aura of light. This can be a weapon, it can be a piece of armor, and you can cast this on anyone, but it doesn't require concentration and lasts 100 turns. I kind of prefer Light. You can just give it to someone who needs it, who can run around with it. Let's jump back to Friends. Enchant a non-hostile creature to gain advantage on charisma checks. Once the spell ends, the creature knows it was charmed and might, well, basically not even might, will accuse the spellcaster. This is kind of good if you're happy to use this on someone and run away from them, or you don't want to speak to them again. You can actually talk your way out of the accusation, but it can also cause problems, so use it at your own discretion. Mage Hand, create a spectral hand that can manipulate and interact with objects. It can't really manipulate many objects. All it can do is move objects around and throw them, and attack enemies for 1 damage. You can get it to attack switches if it can reach them and it'll work, but you can't just click on a switch with it and make it work. You can't open doors. It'd be nice if it had more utility. The main downside is concentration also. It doesn't last for very many turns either. But if you're in combat and you're out of range of an enemy and you've got Mage Hand, it's kind of not a bad choice to cast it, because an enemy might attack the Mage Hand. It'll just get rid of it, but it's fine. It hasn't taken any hit points off the rest of your party. Minor Illusion, this is good mostly for outside combat, but even inside combat makes enemies turn around. So it can be useful for getting around. It's not all that bad. Poison Spray, 1 to 12, 1d12 damage. Wow, seems amazing. But the enemy has to pass a Constitution saving throw. Most enemies have a decent Constitution, and its poison damage in quite a few enemies are resistant to poison damage. For example, Dwergar and Undead often are. Also, it's only got a 10-foot range, which means you're going to have to be up close and personal, and maybe, just maybe, you don't want to be doing that with your wizard. Rare Frost, great spell, 1d8 cold damage. If you hit the enemy, the target's movement speed is reduced by 10 feet. This is really good, because if an enemy is kind of at the range where they can just about reach you, and you hit them with Rare Frost, it pretty much forces the AI to dash, which means no attack is coming your way, and you've essentially wasted their turn, also while doing a little bit of damage. Shock and Grasp, I quite like this one, because you're not always going to be at range. As much as you try, enemies do sometimes run to your wizards, jump to your wizards, teleport to your wizards, and if you hit an enemy with Shock and Grasp, they cannot use reactions, so they can't take an opportunity attack against you. Also, it has advantage when using the spell on creatures wearing metal armor. It's not a huge number of enemies, but it's nice when it happens, and I'm just going to pretend True Shot doesn't exist because nobody should be taking it. Now, you might have noticed there's a missing cantrip here, which is Firebolt. The reason for that, let's just pick these two for now, is currently because my race is High Elf, which gets to pick a cantrip. If I change it to Wood Elf, Firebolt then comes here. So let's look at Firebolt. 1d10 damage. It's the second highest damaging cantrip aside from poison spray, but its range is 60 feet. Some enemies are resistant to fire. It's not too many at the moment, but Firebolt has got the added utility of setting things alight, setting things on fire. And things like doors are also often vulnerable to fire damage, so you can use this to break down some doors, some chests. I would often want to have a wizard with Firebolt. Now, when it comes to picking your cantrip, there is, on the Nautiloid, a scroll of Firebolt, which means you can learn Firebolt. In fact, in the second room in the game, we can find a scroll of Firebolt. So it's kind of a waste of cantrip to use this. I know some of you might be thinking, oh, but that's metagaming. Yes, it kind of is, but we're playing a video game, and it'd be very difficult to find a game where people aren't going to be doing this. I'm just letting you know your options. You can use that knowledge if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to use it, but there is a scroll of Firebolt on the Nautiloid. In fact, I'll probably show you later. So I would usually avoid Firebolt. Also, there are several scrolls of Chill Touch, which we can learn. There used to be but several scrolls of Shock and Grasp and Rare Frost, but I've found in patch 9 I'm finding very, very few, if any of them. So I probably would start picking these. So my picks, if I had to pick 3, either Rare Frost or Shock and Grasp, maybe even both. Chill Touch I'd probably use a scroll for later, as I would with Firebolt. If I know I've got allies in my party who need light and darkness, such as Gerd and Lae'zel, I'll probably pick light. And then some other utility cantrip, usually. Maybe Minor Illusion, Mage Hand. I might leave Acid Splash until level 5. Or maybe pick up Shock and Grasp. It depends what you want to do with your wizard. If you want to have lots of choices in combat, then maybe Shock and Grasp and Rare Frost are really good ideas. If you want a bit more utility, perhaps Mage Hand or Friends, if you want your wizard to be the one who's actually talking to people. Right, I'm actually going to go and pick Shock and Grasp. Then we come to spells. 21 available spells at level 1. These are spells that are in your spell book. It doesn't mean you can cast all of them all the time, but this is your choice of spells that you can prepare from. And like I mentioned with Firebolt and Chill Touch, there are scrolls in the game that we can learn spells from as a wizard. This is unique to wizards. Again, on the Nautiloid, there's a scroll of Mage Armor in the very first room. There's a scroll of Chromatic Orb and a scroll of False Life. If you're happy to use that knowledge, do not pick these 3 at level up. In fact, lots of these scrolls appear during the game. Some that don't. Jump, Longstrider, Disguise Self. I don't think I've ever seen Expeditious Retreat. I don't think I've seen Find Familiar. However, I feel like I've seen scrolls of all of these other spells. So if you want to maximize the number of spells that you know, and you're happy to, again, to use this knowledge ahead of time, I'd pick these spells because there's no other way you're going to get them, apart from at level up. Anyway, talking through the spells themselves. Again, I'll try and be a brief but detailed description. Burning Hand, this is good for dealing guaranteed damage, but you have to be up close within 17 feet. Its area of effect affects all creatures. If the enemies pass a dexterity saving throw, then they take half damage of the 3d6, otherwise they take the full amount. And it's kind of good. The only downside really is the range, but you can get several enemies. It's fire damage, which some enemies are resistant to. But yeah, it's not that bad. It's guaranteed damage, which is not common, actually, for most spells. Charm Person, in combat, I'd say this is a waste, because it just means your wizard won't get hit, but your allies will. And if you want to use this for outside of combat, just pick Friends instead, I would say, so you don't have to waste a level 1 spell or spell slot on it. Chromatic Orb is great because we have different types of damage which we can choose, and the acid, cold, fire, lightning and poison leave the surface as well. Again, some of you don't like that. I can understand, it's not like this in 5th edition. This is a change Larian have made. Whether you like it or not is up to you. Or we get 3d8 thunder damage for the most damage there. And yeah, this is a good spell because we get to choose our damage type. So if an enemy is resistant or vulnerable to a particular damage type, we can make our choice based on that. Color Spray blinds a creature or creatures up to a combined 33 hit points. This is alright. I don't often use it because by the time enemies are getting down to low numbers of hit points, we can almost better off just getting rid of them. There is also a ring of Color Spray. Disguise Self. This lets you change your appearance to any race. And so if you know you want to look like a particular race, such as a Drow or Githyanki or whatever, then you can use this. I don't often pick this. There are some other ways of getting this. Shadowheart gets it anyway, but it can be useful. Expeditious Retreat. Gain dash as a bonus action. The main downside to this is its concentration, and there are other concentration spells you probably really want to be using. So I don't often learn this. It does use a bonus action though, which is kind of nice, but I'd rather be concentrating on something else most of the time. False Life. Gain 7 temporary hit points. Maybe at the lower levels this is okay, because 7 temporary hit points is a fair amount. We only start off with about 8 hit points roughly, depending on your constitution and so on. So yeah, this is very nice at the early levels, but as you get to higher and higher levels, 7 temporary hit points starts to mean less and less. It can be upcast using a high level spell slot to get more temporary hit points. I tend to stop using it after a while. Featherfall. This isn't exactly mandatory at some point. You can use scrolls for this, but it's really, really useful to have. So you cast this, and anyone within this 30-foot range becomes immune to fall damage. and it's great. It affects all your allies. It's a bonus action. I know in 5th edition it is a reaction. I don't know if that would change. Some of you want it to be a reaction. I kind of also like being able to use it ahead of time and not use my reaction, because actually now we've got counterspell as well. Find familiar. Again, the service of a familiar. This is the same familiar as the ranger can have. The downside to this is the familiars have very few hit points. It can easily be killed in battle, and you have to spend another level 1 spell slot to get it back. The nice thing though is if you can keep it alive, it will stay with you over a long rest now. Fog Cloud. This game gives you some battlefield control. I haven't really done it in a while, but you can put up Fog Cloud, hide inside it, and then the enemies can't see you. You can step out of Fog Cloud, attack, go back in, hide, and then you're perfectly safe. I don't tend to abuse that anymore. Grease. One nice thing about Grease is it's not concentration. What does it do? It creates a roughly a 13-foot radius surface of, well, grease, and enemies might fall prone if they fail a dexterity saving throw. And if they fall prone, they lose their turn. If they're concentrating, they stop concentrating. It's actually kind of powerful. It can be set alight, and people are like, oh yeah, Grease with Fireball gives you like a little fireball. It does like 1d4 damage. It's not really worth Grease and for 1 turn and then Fireball for another action to create 1d4 fire damage, in my own personal opinion. It can be done. It is flammable, so basically watch out. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Cast this on an enemy, they fall prone. Hits against them will be critical hits if they're made within 5 feet. But every time they take damage, they get a wisdom saving throw. And also at the end of their turn, they can make a wisdom saving throw. So they get more saving throws compared to something like Whole Person. But it's a level 1 spell slot. It requires concentration, so that you've got to make up your mind whether you want to use concentration for this or not. Jump. It's great. Cast it on someone, they triple their jump distance for 10 turns. It doesn't have to be yourself. Probably better used on someone who wants to jump around or get around the battlefield quickly because they're melee, maybe like a fighter or paladin. Long Strider, touch a creature to increase its movement speed by 10 feet until long rest, not concentration. I used to use this a lot, but I'm starting to use it less and less. I usually want to use my spells for doing other things. Mage armor, unless you've got another way to have a better armor class, you kind of need this as a wizard because your armor class becomes 13 plus your dexterity modifier if you're not wearing armor. One thing I want to say is if you're wearing armor you're not proficient with, you cannot cast spells and you're basically going to be a useless wizard. Magic Missile, love it. I take it pretty much all the time. It doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but it always hits the target. That can hit some objects in the way by accident, I think. That still needs to be fixed. Always hits them. There's 1d4 plus 1 force damage. Almost nothing is resistant to force damage currently. And you can use this to finish off enemies or try and break concentrations. If you hit an enemy 3 times, with all 3 darts, it forces 3 concentration checks, constitution saving throws. Yeah, it's just got quite a good bit of utility. Protection from evil and good. It requires concentration, which is the main downside to this. But anyway, the target can't be charmed, frightened, or possessed. And when creatures attack it, these creatures, as in Celestials, Elementals, Fae, Fiends, and Undead, they have disadvantage. Also, there is a point in the Hag Slayer where this comes in useful. Ray of Sickness. What it is an attack roll. If you hit, you do 2d8 poison damage, and then they make a Constitution saving throw, and if they fail, they become poisoned. And that means they have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, but we're in combat, so we're worrying about the attack rolls, really. The main downside to this is it's poison damage. And again, I've said it earlier, several enemies are resistant to poison, so it's not necessarily the best. And you're not guaranteed this poison condition, but it's kind of for level 1 spell. It's a nice single target spell. The only other one similar to it really is Chromatic Orb in that sense. Sleep, put creatures up to a combined 24 hit points into a magical slumber. Lasts for 2 turns. This is good for taking enemies outside of combat, but the AI will shove them awake. So you have to pay very careful attention to the turn order to make sure this enemy is going to be asleep when you want it to. If you do make an attack against the sleeping enemy within 5 feet, the attack will be a critical hit. The enemy will wake up. And one very lovely thing about sleep is it doesn't require concentration, unlike something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Thunderwave, 2d8 thunder damage, not the highest damage. For example, Burning Hands is 3d6, but release a wave of thunderous force that pushes away all creatures and objects if they fail a Constitution saving throw. This is great. There's lots of verticality in the game, lots of places to knock people off. And lastly, Witch Bolt will forth a beam of crackling energy. Link yourself. So when you hit, you do 1d12 lightning damage, and then in subsequent turns, you can just use an action to do 1d12 lightning damage automatically. It kind of sounds good, but kind of at the end of the day, requires concentration, and if they move too far away, you can't use this. And 1d12 damage isn't really much more than 1d10 from Firebolt. We can, I haven't mentioned this yet because it hasn't really come up, but lightning damage and cold damage can be doubled if we make an enemy wet. We can literally make them vulnerable to it, so they take double the damage. So, I mean, if you're using it with an enemy that's wet, it's actually not a bad idea. And once we get to level 5, this becomes almost redundant because our cantrips can do more damage. I'll get to level 5 later. So which spells are good to pick? Right, if you're not going to be worrying about what scrolls you can find, I would definitely pick Mage Armor. I personally very much like Magic Missile and Chromatic Orb, and that's kind of two attacking spells. It's good to have some utility spells, maybe Jump, maybe some control spells as well, like Tasha's Hideous Laughter or Grease. Sleep is good. Basically, spells I would avoid. Personally, I don't often find Disguise Self particularly needed, but you can get some great roleplay moments. Expeditious Retreat is one I would definitely avoid. Protection from Evil and Good, I don't think it comes up enough to really warrant taking it. All the I definitely wouldn't pick Charm Person. Don't usually pick Find Familiar. Don't find Witch Bolt generally good enough, but if you're making enemies wet, it is good. But otherwise, most spells have got a use. Not always going to be used in every combat, but there aren't a huge number of bad level 1 spells. I've got 3 prepared spells. Where does this come from? This comes from my level plus my intelligence modifier. So my level is 1. My intelligence modifier is currently +2, so currently prepare 3 spells that I could use during combat, or even outside of combat at any one time. We want to increase this as best we can. Right, like I said, it's going to take a while to go through these spells. Right, then we come to race. Pretty much looking for a race that increases intelligence. So High Elf here, we get to pick a cantrip. I've already talked about these cantrips, but you get 1 extra cantrip, kind of cool, maybe Acid Splash. We also get some proficiencies, probably not going to use them as a wizard, but do still get them. And Dexterity +2, which is nice. 2 tieflings have intelligence +1, being Asmodeus and Mephistopheles. Asmodeus tieflings also get Thaumaturgy, which isn't on the wizard cantrip list, so this is a nice way to get Thaumaturgy for wizard. And then at level 3, Asmodeus tieflings would also get Hellish Rebuke, which is kind of cool. It's not a spell on the wizard spell list. And then at level 5, we get Darkness, which is a spell we can take, but that requires concentration. It's kind of cool if you want those spells. Plus, we do get resistance to fire damage. And then Mephistopheles tieflings get Mage Hand at level 1. Then at level 3, they get Burning Hands, which is nice. This is once. When I'm saying they get these spells, it's once per long rest. And then at level 5, they get Flame Blade. Probably not the best idea for most wizards. So if I was going for a tiefling, I'd probably go for Asmodeus. Humans get intelligence +1, plus we get dexterity and constitution, which is nice for defense, and wisdom for defense against some spells. Githyanki, intelligence +1, and we get proficiency in armors, so we don't have to worry about mage armor if we pick this, and we can wield some weapons. Like I said, we're not really going to be attacking with our weapons, but it's nice to get these proficiencies. Also, we get Mage Hand. At level 3, we get Jump. At level 5, we get Misty Steps. We get lovely mobility spells as a Githyanki. Actually, quite a good choice. Half Elf, we can always pick Intelligence here to put it up to 16, and we get to pick a cantrip if we're a high Half Elf. You could pick Wood or Drow as well if you want access to other spells, but these spells are based off your Charisma modifier. One thing I didn't say earlier, I just want to point out, the cantrips we pick from the High Elf or High Half Elf are based on our Intelligence modifier, so it works very well with a wizard. And then gnomes, all gnomes get Intelligence +2, the only race to get Intelligence +2. So if you want very high intelligence to begin with, if you're happy to use the Hag's Hair, you can put your intelligence up to 18, and then pick a different feat apart from Intelligence +2 at level 4. Anyway, 3 types of gnome. Forest gnomes also get us dexterity, dark vision, and also speak with animals. Again, wizards don't get access to this spell normally, so if you want your character to have speak with animals, this is one way to do it. Deep gnomes, kind of cool. You also get dexterity, which is good. Superior dark vision, up to 80 feet. Lovely. Only Drow get that also. An advantage on stealth checks. Maybe you won't be stealthing too much. And then rock gnomes, we get in constitution +1. This is also a defensive stat. Dark Vision, Artificer's Law, so expertise in history. I don't particularly value that very much. There aren't really very many really important history checks. One thing I forgot to mention about the gnomes also is we get advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, which is amazing. So if we have a spell cast against us, which forces a wisdom saving throw, as a wizard we have proficiency in it, and also as a gnome we have advantage plus that proficiency. You can, of course, pick any other race. We can, and there is an item, I may as well speak about it now, called the Warped Headband of Intellect, which sets your intelligence to 17. So if you're happy to use your head slot for that Warped Headband of Intellect, you're kind of free to pick any race you want. I say you're free, I mean, I'm assuming you want to make a wizard with a good intelligence, because that's what makes a wizard good at casting spells. So with the Warped Headband of Intellect, yeah, you've got complete freedom if you want to do that. Also, now, what am I going to do? I'm going to go with a gnome, because I want to show a wizard with a very high intelligence. Let's go with... I quite like the superior dark vision here. Then we come to abilities. If you want to cast more spells, if you want your spells to have a higher chance to hit, and a higher chance for the enemies to fail their saving throws, you want a high intelligence. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to put this at 17. If you don't want to die quickly, you want a higher dexterity, so you have a higher armor class, and a high constitution. Not only helps you have more hit points, but also helps you pass constitution saving throws. So I'll put these at 14. We have the option to put dexterity up to 16, but then our other scores are very low. Although we have proficiency in wisdom saving throws, I'd say it's a bad idea to have it at -1. I'd always put that at least at 0. And then the rest is it's always up to you, but we've still got some points to play with. Perhaps you want even more points into wisdom, so your wisdom checks are higher and your wisdom saving throws are higher, or perhaps You like having a bit more strength because you want to jump a bit further, or you want to be able to shove a bit better, hold a bit more, or perhaps you want this to be your main character, as it were, the face of the party, as you put the rest of it into charisma. Of course, if you're using the warped headbands of intellect, you know you're doing this ahead of time. Put intelligence as low as possible, and then everything else as high as you want. You've got loads and loads of points to play with there. Something like this, but I'm not going to do that. I do want as much intelligence as possible. And yeah, don't leave an odd number because you don't actually get any bonus for that. There we are. So I'm having my charisma at -1, wisdom at +1, and strength at, well, 0. Skills, obviously you get some skills dependent on your background, so pick whichever skills you want. For a wizard, in terms of combat, I mean, maybe you might want to find a background that gives you either acrobatics or athletics proficiency if you want to be shoved a bit less, or athletics if you want to shove a bit harder, or more likely to shove, I should probably say. Otherwise, these are skill checks outside of combat. Maybe you want to really lean in on the intelligence side of things, so like religion, investigation. But there are a lot of characters that you can spread your proficiencies between. So I don't personally worry too much about my proficiencies, because I feel like we've got guidance, we've also got the level 2 spell enhance ability, and we've got a lot of characters who have different strengths. So really up to you. And if you don't want to have Astarion in your party, maybe sleight of hand, or you don't want to have Astarion or Shadowheart in your party for some reason, and you pick sleight of hand, there we are, you can pick that. Alright, I'm going to go to the Nautiloid next and show you where we can find these scrolls. So I've just loaded in, and I said we can find some scrolls. See, I haven't even got past the autosave section yet. So the first scroll, we're going to come up this way. I'm going to not pick up anything else, straight to the scroll. I'm going to jump to here, jump over to here, there's Dead Thrall, and here's Mage Armor, which is why I didn't pick up Mage Armor. And then you can heal that damage. Just into the next room, the second room, on one of these 3 fiends. I can never remember exactly which one. Maybe this last one, I think it's this one. Yeah, there's a scroll of Firebolt. We do need gold to learn these. We only have 4 gold, so we can't learn them yet, but we will get some gold. And one last quick thing, since we're right here. There is sometimes some gold in this chest. This chest has random loot, so there's no way to know what we're going to get. I've had like thieves tools before, I've had a scroll before. There we are, scroll of grease and some 45 gold. Now, I've already got grease as a spell, but you're never guaranteed to get grease here. At 49 gold, I can't quite learn cantrip. I need 1 more gold. And for a level 1 spell, we also need 50 gold. This room that has Shadowheart in, next to this elaborate reliquary, we have the Scroll of Chromatic Orb and Scroll of False Life. These 2 are always here. It's always these 2 scrolls. Now, to learn a spell, I've already shown you one way. You can right click on a scroll and click on this Learn Spell option. I'm not going to quite do that. There's a second way. That's kind of more useful. If you press K, it brings up the spellbook window. Click on this button here, Learn More Spells. It tells you the cost and the level of the spell, and you can tick. Well, if I tick a second one, I can't learn because I don't have enough gold. I'm going to learn Firebolt first. Mage Armor is actually also a very good choice, first of all. I'm going to learn Firebolt because it's an extra cantrip. I'm going to pick up more gold, and I will learn more spells as we go through. And now I have Firebolt as a cantrip. Before I level up, I want to show you a bug that's currently in the game. So I've just about scraped together enough gold to learn a second spell. I'm going to learn Mage Armor because it's so important. So I've got Mage Armor. You can see I prepare spells, this button here. I can switch out and cast Mage Armor. Alright, I've got the spell. I've just leveled up. I've got Shadowheart. I'm going to go to the Wizard Level Up screen. And before I choose my subclass, we get to pick 2 new spells per level. I've currently got the choice of Mage Armor, even though I already know the spell. I really hope this gets taken out before the final game, because this is basically a trap. If I choose Mage Armor, I've completely wasted either 50 gold or my choice of spell, whichever way you want to put it. Anyway, I'm going to go with Jump, because we don't get it as a scroll. And because I really like Magic Missile, I'm going to pick that nice and early. And we get 1 more prepared spell. Now we come to our subclass. I've got this wizard here. I'm going to use Gale as the other one. We've got Evocation. As an Evocation wizard, to learn Evocation spells from a spell scroll costs half as much. And then we get Sculpt spells. This is very powerful. Allies automatically succeed their saving throws and take no damage from these spells, which is very important. Because if we cast Fireball with our allies inside, if we didn't have this second part here, they would take half damage from it. But because of Sculpt spells, they would take 0 damage. I've seen a few people online saying like, oh, you don't need Evocation because you just have to place your people correctly. And if you can't do that, you're a bad player. And there's some merit to that argument. But enemies, you can't control your enemies completely. They're going to jump in at your wizard. They're going to jump into your party. And sometimes there's loads of enemies grouped up. And in fact, it could be a very valid tactic to send one ally out ahead, try and make sure they're the only ally, at least the melee enemies can reach, get them gathered around, and then cast an area effect spell with your wizard, such as Shatter. I want to point out though that this here is only for your evocation spells. So Cloud of Daggers, this doesn't work for because that's a conjuration spell, believe it or not. Then Abjuration, same thing for the Abjuration spells compared to the evocation wizard. They cost half the price. There aren't so many Abjuration spells, so this maybe doesn't save you as much money. And Arcane Ward, so once per day, that's really more than once per day I think, but when you cast an Abjuration spell of level 1 or higher, of which Mage Armor is 1 and is probably the one spell you should be casting if you're an Abjuration wizard, you create a magical ward. The ward has a maximum of 5 hit points. Now that actually is dependent upon your level plus your intelligence modifier and absorbs all damage done. When it's reduced to 0, you take the remaining damage. And this is very good for a defensive sort of wizard. Basically, you give yourself extra hit points, which is very nice. I'm going to go for evocation for this wizard and I'll make Gale the Abjuration wizard. And I need to repick my spells. Oh no, definitely not that one. Repick my spells. Yeah, jump and magic missile. And now, if I come to this spellbook here, we can see that Chromatic Orb now only costs 25 gold to learn because it's an evocation spell. I don't have 25 gold. I've only got, how much gold? 2 gold. I'll have to wait to learn it, but I will go and learn it. At level 3, we get a few more hit points, we get 1 more level 1 spell slot, and we get level 2 spells, which is kind of cool. We get to pick 2 spells. I'm going to go through them as briefly as possible, but as detailed as possible. Melf's Acid Arrow. So Melf's Acid Arrow, if you hit, does 44 damage, and then the next turn does 2d4 damage and creates an acid surface. Kind of sounds cool, but actually the damage is very low, really, for a level 2 spell. It causes, what, 2 concentration checks, 1 on the first turn and 1 on the second turn, I suppose. I don't often use this. There are just better spells. You may as well just use Chromatic Orb Acid for the most part. It has very similar sort of damage and also creates an acid surface. Blindness doesn't require concentration, magically blinds an enemy creature for 10 turns. Can be cool, can be useful, gives you advantage against them. They have disadvantage, good against maybe single target kind of bosses or difficult characters to kill. Cloud of Daggers, this is busted, this is over the top. When I said Melf's Acid Arrow doesn't really cause much damage, so Cloud of Daggers, when you first cast it, you do 4d4 slashing damage, and then the beginning of the enemy's next turn, you do another 4d4 slashing damage. Currently, as of patch 9, enemies run through Cloud of Daggers and take damage from it. It's probably easily the best level 2 spell, pretty much, just because of the sheer amount of damage it can do. I pretty much always take it because it's that good. Cloud of Madness sounds awesome. Right? Instill Madness in a humanoid enemy, making them attack the creature closest to them other than you, even if it's allied. This really works. I've found that when I've used this, enemies actually do still come running for me, throwing things at me, attacking me, even if there is an ally closer. I just don't think it's working very well. Blur, your body becomes blurred. Attackers have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. This is all attackers. Unfortunately, requires concentration. It's an awesome defensive spell, but if it takes up your concentration, I find my wizards aren't actually dying that much. Don't take that much damage very often, so I don't take defensive spells too much. But if you're finding it a bit more difficult and you want something defensive, Blur could be for you. Darkness creates a 17-foot radius cloud of darkness, which you can't see through, you can't target into or out of. Good for battlefield control, you can hide in it. Dark Vision. I don't tend to take this, didn't used to. Now that we've got level 5, level 2 spell slots aren't quite as valuable. Now that we've got level 3 spell slots as well. And this grants Dark Vision to an ally or someone that you touch. It doesn't require concentration. So if you're happy using up your level 2 spell slot once per day for someone like Laser, you can use this. Remember, we do have Arcane Recovery. Have yet to show you that. Detect Thoughts. Shadowheart starts with a scroll of Detect Thoughts. That's hardly metagaming. Like, you can't avoid it. And by the time you get to level 3, you're probably going to have Shadowheart. So you might have learnt this already. Anyway, what does it do? During certain skill checks, certain conversations, we can use Detect Thoughts. Now that we can cast it during conversation, this is much more useful to have. But you've got to scroll for this, I would say. Enlarge, Reduce. You can make a creature larger or smaller. And if you make them larger, it doesn't show us here, but if you make them larger, they add 1d4 to their weapon attacks. Also have advantage on their strength checks and saving throws, which is great. And if you make an enemy smaller, basically the opposite happens. Flaming Sphere. This used to be completely invulnerable. It has 50 hit points, but it's still kind of overpowered in a way. It requires concentration, so we can't have both Cloud of Daggers and Flaming Sphere. It doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but it just soaks up so much. Enemies will attack it. It's got a low armor class. It's got 50 hit points. It is resistant to some damage. It's a good companion to have. It gets its own turn in combat. It doesn't require a bonus action. Not a bad choice. Hold Person. Paralyze a humanoid creature, has to be humanoid, making it unable to move or act. Also, it doesn't tell us here that if they are held, attacks within 5 feet are critical hits automatically. It doesn't matter what you roll. So it's really, really good for getting loads of damage. Requires a wisdom saving throw to resist though, and requires concentration again, so we can't have Whole Person and Cloud of Daggers, or Whole Person and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Invisibility only lasts 10 turns. kind of sucks now. It was good for exploration before, getting around the map, seeing what's ahead, but now that only lasts 10 turns, it's really not as easy to do that. Maybe you can go to turn-based mode, someone who's really fast or can jump really far with jump on them, and you could go quite a long way while invisible. During combat, as soon as you attack, cast a spell, maybe use an item that isn't on yourself, and then you lose the invisibility condition, so I wouldn't usually use it in combat. Magic weapon. This basically gives the weapon +1 bonus to attack and damage, even if it's already magical. Gives it an extra +1. The real downside is its concentration. You wouldn't give this to yourself. You'd cast this on maybe your fighter or someone who's using a weapon of some sort. And it's kind of a cool benefit, but the concentration just really kind of lets it down a bit. Mirror Image, another defensive spell, doesn't work like 5th edition at all. You have 3 duplicates, each increase your armor class by 3. So at the beginning, your armor class goes up by 9, and if an attack misses you, one of your duplicates disappears. Doesn't require concentration. You can cast Mirror Image and Blur. Maybe a bit over the top, but it can be done. Misty Step, great for getting around, not just the battlefield, but for exploration as well. Requires a bonus action, not an action, so even in combat, it's really, really good to use. There is a necklace with it, but it's good to have in a pinch. Phantasmal Force, I would avoid this. The real downside, 1d6 psychic damage per turn, or 1d6 damage per turn. The type of damage changes depending on what type of damage it last received, but it's concentration, 1d6 damage a turn. When I can do 4d4, I know this isn't going to be guaranteed for a particular enemy the whole time, but I mean, honestly, I'm just going to cast Cloud of Daggers and have 8d4 damage done by the start of its next turn. And to catch up to that would take several turns of Phantasmal Force. I'm just not going to cast this. Rare of Enfeeblement, I found myself rarely casting this. The target does half damage with weapon attacks using strength. The real downside is it requires concentration. And again, I'd really rather be concentrating on other things than this against a single enemy. If you've got a boss, obviously it can be really good. So against someone maybe like Draw Ragslin, that could be good. Grim doesn't really work out, he doesn't have a weapon, and so maybe Near, but he often casts spells instead. It's situational at best. Scorching Ray, it's okay. Health 3 Rays of Fire, each ray deals 2d6 fire damage. By the time we get to higher level 5, we can cast Firebolt, which is 2d10. It isn't going to be as much as like 6d6, but this is the level 2 spell slot. You can miss, but if you've got maybe Hex, or if you've got someone who you know going to get critical hits against, that's maybe they're held, this could be really good, really stack up the damage. And there are some items to buff fire damage, so it's not really that bad. Shatter, this is great. This used to be my go-to AoE Area of Effects level 2 spell, but we've got Cloud of Daggers. The main downside to Cloud of Daggers is its area of effect is quite small. This is a 10-foot radius, Cloud of Daggers is only a 7-foot radius. And that's quite a big difference. Remember, the area of a circle is pi r squared, so the extra 3 feet is actually quite a significant amount higher. So what does it do? You cast it, any creatures inside take 3d8 thunder damage if they fail a constitution saving throw. If they pass, they take half damage. It's an evocation spell though, so as an evocation wizard I can cast this and not worry about my allies. And lastly, web. It's concentration again, sadly. Cover an area in thick, flammable webbing that slows creatures down and possibly enwebs them. This is really good because they can't move. Basically, if they're in web, they've wasted their turn. This is really good battlefield control. But again, you're competing concentration with lots of other spells. As an evocation wizard, I'm going to pick up Shatter and Cloud of Daggers. There is no scroll for Cloud of Daggers. Most of these level 2 spells do have a scroll, but Cloud of Daggers we don't have, Magic Weapon we don't have, Phantasmal Force we don't have, I can't remember about Enlarge Reduce, and Crown of Madness I don't think we have, but actually a lot of these level 2 spells there are scrolls available, but they're quite rare. You might have to buy them, which is a little bit expensive, but yeah, make your choice. And when you level up, make sure you're not picking a spell you've already learned from a scroll. I'm just going to remind you of that book. Before we get to level 4, I just want to show you a few things. One, to change your spells, just in case it wasn't clear earlier, press K, and then you get to prepare any spells that you want. And he hasn't actually cast Mage Armor today. I'm going to have Shatter and Cloud of Daggers, and then maybe Magic Missile. I'm an Evocation Wizard, so I'm going to go lots of Evocation spells. Perhaps one utility spell, maybe Sleep. Gale, I got him to pick Misty Step and Enlarge Reduce. He's going to have definitely Mage Armor, maybe Feather Fall, Enlarge Reduce, and why not Misty Step? Now, before I carry on, I just want to, again, keep showing you things. So if I cast Shatter, we can see none of my allies are highlighted. I'll maybe show you that in a battle. And then Gale. Gale's the Abjuration Wizard. Mage Armor. It's an Abjuration spell. Cast it, and now he's got 9 temporary hit points, which has come from the combination of his level and his intelligence modifier. And the reason it's 9 is because it's 2 times your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier. So at level 4, if I don't change his intelligence, it would be 2 times 4, which is 8, plus 3, which is 11. Thankfully, Aaron had a false life scroll, which I made Gale learn. So we've got 9 hit points from the Arcane Ward. And it should be that the 7 temporary hit points kind of stack on top of the Arcane Ward, but they don't. It used to. In fact, before patch 9, we used to be able to stack Arcane Ward and False Life, but now we can't. They are supposed to be 2 different sources of hit points. The Arcane Ward is very unique to the Abjuration School Wizard, but now False Life doesn't work with it. It's really not as good. I used to have Gale cast Mage Armor, then Arcane Ward. It doesn't work. Right, let's look at this Arcane Recovery also. So at level 3 we have 2 charges. So the number of charges we have is equal to our level divided by 2 but rounded up. So at level 3, if we do 3 divided by 2, that's 1.5, but for this we round up to 2. So we can recover up to 2 spell slots worth of spells. Now he's used up 4 level 1 spell slots. So what I can do, cast Arcane Recovery twice for level 1 spell slots and we get them back. Or the other option is I could use 2 Arcane Recovery charges to replenish a single level 2 spell slot. So as we level up, we'll get more and more, and then we can recover more and more spell slots. And for the Evocation Wizard, here's Shatter. I could cast it here, a bit silly, but it wouldn't attack my allies, and it says has sculpt spells, which means I can't hurt Shadowheart with Shatter. This is even better here. So if I didn't have an Evocation Wizard, I probably could just about hit. Ooh, it's hard to say if I'd hit Arid in there or not. Don't have to worry, I can just cast it. And there we are, only the enemies got hit. At level 4 we get 1 new cantrip to learn. I'm going to make this guy learn Acid Splash to give some sort of area of effect cantrip. 2 more spells, again make sure you don't pick spells that you've already learned. I don't think he's got magic weapon, that's pretty much for sure. And he doesn't have Crown of Mana, so probably won't use it. An ability score improvement or feat for this Deep Gnome in particular. I am going to put intelligence +2 and then use a Hag's Hair to get it up to 20. Putting intelligence up to the next even number will always be good. Attack rolls go up by +1. Your spell save DC goes up by +1. You can prepare 1 more extra spell. It's all good. Right. Other choices though. I probably wouldn't do anything to do with weapons. We're not really going to be wearing weapons. Perhaps you could actually have this and have a dagger. Put your armor class up by 2 for your reaction. But there's probably another better choice for your wizard. Lightly armored, perhaps if you're happy with your intelligence at 16 or 17 and you've got an odd number for your dexterity, you could put your dexterity up to something even, and or maybe your strength up to something even, and then give yourself proficiency with light armor, which isn't such a bad choice because there is Minthara's armor, which gives you advantage on constitution saving throws. Armor class of 12 is almost as good as mage armor, saves you having to cast mage armor. Slightly armored is definitely a good possibility. We could pick up a magic initiate to increase our spellcasting capacity. However, unless you pick a Magic Initiate Wizard, your cantrips will depend on another stat that isn't intelligence. But if you want more cantrips for your wizard, perhaps you could pick this up. I haven't used Chill Touch yet, or Poison Spray perhaps, and then 1 spell that you can cast once per day. And one potential choice is Mage Armor, because you only need to cast it once per day. But is that really worth it? I'm not so sure. Maybe Find Familiar. If you're going to go for another class, I would go for cantrips that don't depend on another stat, such as Friends, or Dancing Lights, or Minor Illusion, Mage Hand, Blade Ward. Then you have to pick a spell that, again, doesn't really require your, in this case, Charisma to be very high. Maybe Heroism, but it's concentration. Kind of up to you. I mean, Speak with Animals would work, actually. With Magic Initiate Cleric, we can get these 2 spells, which do not depend on intelligence, and are kind of get enough spells. Maybe not Resistance, not so important, but maybe Thaumaturgy or Resistance. Definitely Guidance if I was going for this. And then here, maybe Bless. Command. Command is a strong spell, actually, but requires your Wisdom to be high for the spell save DC to be high, so it's very difficult to pick. Again, Druid, similar to the Cleric. I'd probably pick Guidance. These others depend on your Wisdom modifier, apart from Resistance. Spells here, I mean, Goodberry doesn't depend on your Wisdom modifier. It says Wisdom is your spellcasting ability, but Wisdom doesn't actually affect anything from Goodberry. Jump, Long Strider, Speak with Animals. There's a few here that don't actually depend on Wisdom. Magic Initiate Sorcerer, I wouldn't pick this, because anything available for Magic Initiate Sorcerer is available to Magic Initiate Wizard. You should just go for that. Magic Initiate Warlock, unless your Charisma's high, we don't want to pick an attacking cantrip. Mage Hand, Minor Illusion, Blade Ward, Friends perhaps. And spells, actually Hex here is probably the best, because this doesn't require your Charisma to be high, does require your concentration. But just want to point out, Magic Missile doesn't work with Hex. Hex only works with spells when you attack it. And what it means, it doesn't say clearly, is an attack roll. Magic Missile doesn't have an attack roll. Anything that requires a saving throw doesn't work with Hex. Things like Chromatic Orb, your cantrips like Ray of Frost, Firebolt, Chill Touch, Shock and Grasp would work with Hex. Martial, I know, maybe Mobile, not so important for a wizard, but it's never going to be a bad choice. Maybe Tough. But if you're going to go for Tough, generally better for go to Constitution +2, or at least up to your next even number, because this helps your Constitution saving throws also, which is for your concentration. Anyway, this dude is going to go for Intelligence. For wizards, I often do just go for Intelligence +2. It just makes them that much better spellcasters. It's kind of hard not to, in my own opinion. And at level 5, we get the opportunity to learn 2 level 3 spells. There are a few level 3 spell scrolls around. I don't think any of them are actually guaranteed to be a particular spell. There's one where in a hidden chest where the dragon goes overhead. There's one in the bottom of the Arcane Tower. There's some in Grimforge, for example, but they all seem to be random. So Animate Deads. Also, if I have made a video at the beginning of patch 9 about these spells. If you want a bit more detail about the spells, go watch that video. Animate Dead. This is kind of cool. Doesn't require concentration. You can raise a skeleton or zombie. I'd go with zombie most of the time because they can actually make more zombies during combat. Bestow Curse, unfortunately, requires concentration. It kind of makes it go down, in my opinion. There's various curses we can apply to an enemy. We can give them disadvantage to any particular saving throw that we want. Also, there's a chance to make them miss their turn, which is kind of cool. Counterspell. Counterspell is really cool. Actually, I'm going to take Counterspell. If an enemy casts a spell. And there are some abilities. I've used it against the hag when she was trying to make a clone of Mayrina, or turn herself into Mayrina. You can Counterspell some other abilities as well. It uses a reaction, which is really cool. And at the moment, the highest level spells being cast are level 3, so it's an automatic Counterspell. Fear is really strong. It's concentration, quite a large cone, 30-foot cone. Enemies who fail a wisdom saving throw drop their weapon, brilliant, and spend their turns running away, not just rooted in place. So we can get opportunity attacks against them. They're not going to use their actions to hurt us. It's really, really strong. Feign Dead, useless. Fireball, amazing, and as an evocation wizard, I can't not take it. Fly, it only lasts 10 turns and requires concentration. So outside of combat, you don't get much use out of it. Inside of combat, it's concentration. It's very difficult to really get good at use out of it. I don't particularly like it. Gaseous Form, resistant to all damage. You gain advantage on constitution, dexterity, and strength saving throws. You become tiny in size. So in combat, not very good because you can't actually do anything while you're in gaseous form. But outside of combat, it gives you the fly ability. It's really good for exploration. Glyph of Warding is very strong. You get several different choices of damage that you can do. You can put enemies to sleep. You can push them back. Doesn't require a long time to cast. Doesn't require any gold. It's a very strong area of effect. Haste is very strong. Also, cast this maybe on like a Berserker Barbarian and nothing's going to survive. Also, as a wizard, you can cast 2 spells per turn. I know it's not the same as 5th edition. We've already got that where we can use, for the sorcerer, can cast a spell with a bonus action and an action. If we've got a hasted wizard, they can cast 2 spells. Very strong spell to have. Hypnotic Pattern is an area of effect and actually affects your allies as well as enemies. Bit sad. And if they're hypnotized, they can't move, take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. Unfortunately removed by taking damage. So if you attack an enemy, they stop having this condition. But if you've got enemies in the right sort of position, it can be good. Protection from energy, it's crap, don't take it. Remove curse, there's no reason to take this. There's no curses that it really works on. Sleet Storm is really good for disrupting the concentration of spellcasters, as it says. Creates an ice surface. If they fall prone, they lose concentration. It's quite a large area, requires concentration. Stinking Cloud, also very good at taking enemies out of action. If they fail a constitution saving throw, they will be nauseated, so they can't take an action. Vampiric Touch requires concentration. 3d6 damage, uses your action, which is a bit of a shame. Requires you to get up close, and if you're up close, you're more likely to take damage from melee attacks, and that means your concentration is more likely to be dropped. Does heal you. I wouldn't generally take it. With Gale, I'm probably going to take... That's really hard because we can only pick 2 spells. With Gale, I'm going to have to take... I say have to. In fact, I'll give Gale Counterspell since it's Abjuration. I'll also give him Glyph of Warding since it's Abjuration. So I want to show off... Probably want to show off Haste, to be honest. Also at level 5, it doesn't tell us. Our cantrips now do double damage. Pretty much. So Fireblock becomes 2d10, Rare Frost is 2d8, Acid Splash is 2d6, and so on. So your cantrips become very strong. And so, what it does also mean is that your level 1 spells that deal damage kind of become a bit less useful. And I've seen people like, oh, what's the point in level 1 spell slots if we've got cantrips that do the same damage? It means your level 1 spell slots, for those of you who think that, are for your utility, for your defense, your battlefield control, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Sleep, Grease, Longstrider, Jump. That's what your level 1 spell slots kind of become useful for once you get to level 5 and above. Please don't think your level 1 spell slots are useless. So right next to Joaquin's Rest, towards the Githyanki Patrol, if we take a side path down this way, we have a perception check which I failed. If you didn't know, you can just use a shovel on the ground. Here we are. And inside this chest there's always a level 3 scroll. My luck has often been protection from energy. Oh, scroll of Fireball. That's actually not so bad because Gale doesn't know Fireball. So let's send that to Gale. And we'll take a Silver Chalice. So if I go to Gale, and he can now learn Fireball. Brilliant. So you might want to actually find these chests before you get to level 5 and choose your level 3 spells, because if I'd only had one wizard and I'd been given Fireball, it'd be a bit sad because I couldn't actually learn a new level 3 spell. After either defeating or getting Guiding Light from Bernard, this ring, and putting it on and taking the elevator down to the basement, kind of secret basement, if we come up to here in this chest, we get another spell. I got a Scroll of Fear. Not such a bad scroll, it's quite a nice one. But again, it's random. We don't know which level 3 scroll we're going to get. one more location of a level 3 scroll is down in Grim Forge, really towards the end. This is the Ancient Forge, Ancient Circle. And if you come up to the left, kind of overlooking the actual forge, there's this chest. And here I've got the Scroll of Protection from Energy, the pointless scroll that we shouldn't really be using, but you could have had anything in here. And since we've just been talking about spells, I think it's worthwhile just going over what this stuff actually means at the top here. So this spellcasting ability means intelligence. I've already know this really. Intelligence affects your spells. Now how does it affect your spells? We've got these two values, spell save DC and spell attack. So any spell that says shield here, dexterity, means the enemy rolls a dexterity saving throw. The value they need to get is based on this number, the 16, which is for the wizard I've made, but for Gale, it's well, not measly, but a lower 14. And we are shown how this calculation is made, where the 16 comes from. We start with 8. That's just the base DC. That's a fixed number for any wizards. In fact, all characters for the spell save DCs. Plus the intelligence modifier. Since this gnome's intelligence is 20, that's plus 5. And the proficiency modifier, which comes from your total character level, which is plus 3. So we get 8 plus 8 in the end, which is 16. And Gale, his intelligence is 17. He's currently got the warped headband of intellect, which is why. Which is a plus 3 modifier from intelligence and plus 3 from proficiency. And so his spell save DC is 14, significantly lower, I would say. And this plus 6 spell attack is for the spells that roll an attack roll. Here, attack roll literally says attack roll. We get a plus 8 to that. So you roll d20 plus 8. Don't really know why. It says plus 10 here. Oh, high ground. I mean, if I had high ground, I suppose. That's a bit strange to include it there. And this comes from your the combination of... it doesn't show us here, but it's the combination of your intelligence modifier and your proficiency. Basically the same as this plus 8 here. So maxing out your intelligence is a really good idea because it makes your spells more difficult to resist or more likely to hit. And then onto some items. So I did use the Hag's Hair. We've got Auntie Ethel's Boon here. Now I've got quite a few lightning items, because Spell Sparkler is an amazing weapon for a wizard, because if we have AoE spells or Magic Missile, for example, each enemy hit grants us 2 lightning charges, which gives you +1 to your attack rolls, and when you deal damage, you do +1 lightning damage, and if you get 5 of them, you get +1d8 damage. Now, I've got a couple of extra things here. So while Wiztav here has lightning charges, he has 3 temporary hit points, which is okay, but you do lose your lightning charges over time when you hit enough people, and they do wear out, so it's not a permanent temporary hit points. The Protective Sparks Wall is found in Grimforge. Sorry, Lifebringer is found from the Myconid village, from the trader there. Blurg. Protective Sparks Wall can be found in Grimforge, where it has +1 to armor class, which is alright, and +1 to saving throws is very strong. I've gone for the Gloves of Flint and Steel and the Ring of Fire, because I'm going to be dealing fire damage with this lovely spell, Fireball, and some other spells, but that's what it's really there for. Ring of Colour Spray just gives us a use of Colour Spray. Once per battle, not even short rest. Mistress Grace, we don't necessarily need this, but it's nice to have Featherfall at will. And it's not like wizards naturally proficient with light or medium armor, so we don't get much choice for boots. And I've gone for the Blast Pendant, which can give an extra ability based on lightning charges. And then Spell Thief, although we're not proficient, if we get a critical hit, we can get a level 1 spell slot back. And if an enemy is knocked out, very easy way to do it, and then you get within 5 feet, you can get a critical hit. Other choices for necklace, quite a few choices for necklaces really. The Amulet of Misty Step, in case you want your wizard to have that. The Amulet of Elemental Torment. If you're standing in fire and you're burning and you cast a spell that hits an enemy, they become burning. Or if you're standing in acid and you hit an enemy with the spell, they now have the acid condition. Really quite strong. Psychic Spark, shoot an additional dart whenever you cast Magic Missile. So your level 1 Magic Missile now shoots out 4 darts, which is pretty awesome. Ulmater's Aid, non-cantrip spell, so it does have to be a spell with a level 1 spell slot or above. Deal an additional 1d4 force damage if you're below half your hit points. A bit risky on a wizard because you don't have many hit points to begin with. Uncovered Mysteries, I just happen to have picked that up. But yeah, it gives you Detect Thoughts basically at will, which is pretty cool. I'm going to start with the Blast Pendant. I've given Gale also a few things. I've given him the Warped Headband of Intellect. He doesn't actually benefit from this, but this does come from Lump the Enlightened. This is the Ogre in the Blighted Village. If you made your intelligence less than 16, then your wizard would benefit from this. Poisonous Robe. When the wearer casts a spell that deals poison damage, it deals an additional 1d4 poison damage. There aren't a huge number of spells that deal poison damage. You've got Rare Sickness, that's about it. Oh, sorry, and Poison Spray. But there's not much choice for robes at the moment, so I mean, you may as well, just in case you use it. The Sparks Ward just happened to give that to him. The Sunwalker's Gift, if you choose a race that doesn't have dark vision, this is kind of important if you don't want to have disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. But if you have disadvantage because the enemy is obscured, if you have a spell that affects a saving throw, that doesn't matter. It's okay, because it's the enemy making a saving throw, not you making an attack roll. I've given him Rain Dancer. Another choice which I did pick up is Corellin's Grace. So What this does, if you are not wearing armor, which most wizards won't be, if you're attacked, you get a plus 1d4 bonus to saving throws. It's nice. It's not amazing, but it's nice. It's okay. Morning Frost is a crap weapon. When you cast a spell or cantrip on an enemy, inflict frostbite. What does frostbite do? If that creature takes cold damage, it will take an additional 1 cold damage per turn of frostbite remaining. But it's really difficult to inflict more than 1 round of frostbite. Let's actually get Gale to do that. Did I give him magic missile? Let's see if this works. Right, what we're going to do, give Gale crappy Morning Frost. Just make sure we don't do anything wrong. 1, 2, 3. Maybe it only works on enemies. But anyway, yeah, Morning Frost, I wouldn't take it. Now that I've got it on, I feel like I do need to show you how this is just not really that good. 1, 2, hopefully that hits. And even though we had 3 magic missiles, it's got a single turn of frostbite. And if it takes cold damage, you deal an additional 1 cold damage. Like, for the fact this uses up your weapon slot, just know I'd rather have Rain Dancer, a free spell, Corellin's Grace, just to have some defense. Also the Staff of Arcane Blessing, which I've accidentally left down in the Mage's Tower. Oh well, which gives you Bless, but that's probably best for a Cleric, Shadowheart, because then every time she casts Bless, we get the special blessing. Oh, and potentially, I know this is Lae'zel, but maybe Guiding Light gives you the light cantrip. If you know you want to wear this, then you don't have to take light early on, but it is from the Arcane Tower, from the basement, so you don't get it until a little bit late in the game. So I'm in combat, I'm against these 4 animated armors, and we've got loads of options here. So at level 5, we can of course just try and complete the encounter with a fireball. I'm not going to show that though, because that's the easy thing to do. Usually kind of the best, satisfying at least. Let's look at a few other spells in action. Could you shatter, small AoE? The good thing here, and one thing I would encourage you to do, is take your time, read the spell descriptions, because if you know shatter, right, it's an AoE, we've described it before. Affected creatures made of inorganic materials such as stone or metal here have disadvantage on their saving throw. So we can see if we pick Shatter and put the cursor over one of the animated armors, 91% chance they're going to fail. They're going to take the full 3d8 damage. But instead what I'm going to do, because this does probably more damage over time, is Cloud of Daggers. It's a great spell. It's area of effect. It does damage when we cast it, and the enemies will take damage next turn. What I'm also going to do is show you the Illithid power, because I can.
One day I'll catch a break.
So what is it? Reflective Shell. A protective shell envelops you. It reflects any projectiles targeted at you back to the points of origin. Now, I haven't cast Mage Armor on this wizard yet. This uses a bonus action, so what this means is if/when this animated armor here and the one up here use their crossbows at the wizard here, they'll shoot themselves. You're going to use this reflective shell. You've got to make sure your wizard will be targeted. Having a low AC and staying in range is going to help. That one's dashing, that one's dashing. I might even go through Cloud of Daggers. It's not. This is fine. And now we've got Gale. And again, we can do loads of things here. We can bring out Fireball, probably finish off that armor and damage these two. I'm not going to do that because I do want to show you the reflective shell. Put it on Gale just in case. And then let's just show off one of these spells. I don't know. Let's go for Scorching Ray. Not a very good chance to hit because the armor class is quite high and he doesn't have an intelligence of 18. Look at that. We do 5 damage. Pretty disappointing, to be honest, for level 2 spell slot. You got to be careful with Scorching Ray. Right, let's see. There we are. Reflected. It missed. And the other one. Oh, sorry. There were 2 ranged attacks. We didn't get to see it, but they both to attack and they missed, and it's back to Wiztav's turn. Now we're concentrating. We don't want to lose concentration. When it comes to this animated armor's turn, it will die, it will go down. So what can we do? We're now, this is a bit difficult. Look, we are up close and personal. This isn't going to be perfect. I could use Shatter. What I don't want to do is use a spell that uses concentration, so no haste either. Shock and Grasp is a good choice, but we can only hit one of these 2. And if I move away, oh no, the one on the left, sorry, isn't going to get an opportunity attack. So what we're going to do then is use Shock and Grasp. Or attempt to. There we are. Get some lightning charges. Sadly, we don't get lightning charges from Cloud of Daggers. Probably its downside. Shock and Grasp takes away a reaction. So Reflective Shell will not help with melee attacks. So Gale's going to take a couple of whacks to the face. Perhaps more than a couple. That's kind of lucky, isn't it? Oh, down he goes. That's my own fault for putting Gale up front. Let's get him back up, shall we? Unfortunately, it means he doesn't get an action. This is what we have Misty Step for. going to get out of trouble. Let's get out of there. That's why Misty Step is very useful. We'll get us to next time. Whoa, that animated armor's gone down. And this time... Alright, yeah, Reflective Shell has already been used up. Right, so we got to finish off these 2 armors if possible. It's got 7 hit points, it's got 28. One good choice. Magic Missile. It's not guaranteed to kill this armor, but it's very likely to. This is why Magic Missile is a great spell to have. It's guaranteed damage. We're going to get lightning charges. There we are. And do 1 extra lightning damage. That was actually guaranteed, wasn't it? And I've got a bonus action left. Because I've got Mistress Grace on, it probably won't come into play, but it doesn't use a spell slot. Perhaps I could just use this. And then Gale. So he's actually going to use Hex. He's going to stay out of range. He's not going to be able to get hit. I'm going to try and use Scorching. Oh, no. 20% chance is too low for my standards. Oh, now we can hit. Right, let's see if it works. How many times we can hit. Oh, there we are. Hit twice. Hex is gone. So what I'm going to do, kind of just show you what happens if we use 2 concentration spells. I'm going to use Haste. Note the cloud of daggers in the background. Now gone. Why did I use Haste? It doubles the movement speed, so Lae'zel's got a chance to get up to here. Absolutely perfect. She now has 2 actions, both of which we get 2 weapon attacks from. It's not the same as 5th edition, but it's what we've got, and I'm going to use it. So yeah, we're just going to get going. 1, 2... Let's actually have some... These... Yeah, we're not guaranteed to hit all of them. It's only 50% chance. And because we can... This is now more of a fighter thing, of course. But the point is... Wizards can help. Fighters do really, really well. So I'm going to start a battle with these 2 Duergar, hopefully grab these 2 at the same time, and if things go according to plan, I'll get the 5th one from over here. Now, I've used a few spell slots in that last battle. I've got 3 Arcane Recovery charges. I quite like my level 3 spell slots, so I'm actually going to go and pick Arcane Recovery level 3 and get that back. And being mindful of spell slots, perhaps when we start this fight, I don't need to actually use a spell slot. I'm going to go and use Acid Splash with Wiztab here once it's his turn, and so we can target both of them, maybe do a bit of damage to both. It'll do 2d6 damage if we hit. Let's see. Oh, looks like I got one of them. Yeah, so we've got Gale. I haven't shown Glyph of Warding yet. I quite like it. Now of course we can do lots of damage. What we could do is maybe get them wet and then use Cold or Lightning, but Sleep I believe is actually more powerful if this works out. Unless I put both of them to sleep, though, they'll wake each other up. Oh, of course, they can both save. Roll, they rolled a 17. They rolled a 19. Ah, you know, they just rolled really well. That happens sometimes. Can't be helped. And I accidentally put my own gnome to sleep. So in case you do that, you can shove your own people awake. Obviously, I've put them in more danger. That was my own fault. I did not look properly at the area of effect. And we're going to run away a bit. So yeah, unsurprising they're going for this wizard. Yeah, sure both of them will. Okay, we shouldn't go down. Oof, that was close, wasn't it? So we're in a bit of trouble by the looks of it anyway. We're going to get some fear going. Boom. We're now basically 100% safe. I'm not going to walk away. They might take an opportunity attack. I'm not going to risk it. And because it's always a good idea too, let's just make sure we don't die. So these guys are just going to run away. I'm going to get an opportunity attack against them when it's their turn. Ooh, counter spells. So they're going invisible. I don't particularly mind. I've only got 1 level 3 spell slot left with Gale. So this is up to you to choose. I'm going to not react, because it's not too dangerous for me. It's quite a good idea to have Bless. This only helps with spells that do attack rolls. It's not going to help with spells that force saving throws. So they're fearful. They're just going to run away as long as I remain concentrating on it. And then what I can do, make sure they don't cause any more problems. Do that. And let's go focus on one of them. So what spells do we have? We've got Magic Missile that focuses on a single enemy. Actually, that's about it. Most of the other spells I've got present are good for area of effect. So maybe just go with a cantrip. Keep it simple. We've got a couple of turns. 95% chance to hit. Get lightning charges from it. It's all good. And let's try and keep up. Oh, there we are. Spiders are coming. That could be dangerous because I might lose concentration. I succeeded on the saving throw because I got the spark. Ooh, just about. If it wasn't for Bless, I would have failed that. It's another good reason to have Bless. Right. Gale's going to get some revenge on Ward Pistol. Funny name. We got a Hex there. And because Hex works so well with Scorching Ray, let's try and not have low ground. Unfortunately, I might. Ah, good. If we get too close, we'd have disadvantage. Gone. That's the benefit of using Hex and Scorching Ray. All three hit. The individual Scorching Rays didn't do a huge amount of damage. 3, 7, 9's okay. It's this added necrotic damage. Happened to roll 4 each time. Quite nice. And because I've got enemies incoming from this direction, I'm just going to try and move Gale to safety. You can't get the whole way, but that's okay. Still fearful, which is good. So 10 hit points left. Again, I could go for Magic Missile. Wouldn't be a bad choice. I have to be guaranteed that I'm actually going to do 10 damage, which is not guaranteed unless maybe I use a level 2 spell slot. Why don't I just use Sleep? No one's going to wake him up. Sleep is a very powerful spell when enemies are on low numbers of hit points. A whole bunch of spiders, a bit scary. And perhaps, yes, I think she will create some water. Does Mark? Nope, because I want to use Glyph of Warding, even if he loses concentration. Good, he survived, right. So this is where Glyph of Warding comes into its own. We're going to use, well, not lightning. It says it's not going to hit Mermath. We'll see. Ah, that's going to be okay. Sorted. Let's have a look at how much damage you did. Some of these spiders, 28, 18, 50 lightning damage, because we're getting double damage since they are vulnerable to lightning damage. 48, 32. Yeah, we've just turned this battle on its head. And since this dude is using ranged attacks, Reflective Shell is going to save us. Now, this Duergar is going to be coming in. They haven't got any weapons, so they're not going to be too dangerous. They don't need to worry too much. In fact, Rare Frost, it's a very good idea. It's going to slow them down. Might make them dash while we start moving along. So we can ignore him for now, essentially. So let's see who he goes for. I presume Gale, because his armor class is lower. Go for Hunter's Mark. And reflected back onto him. And he's just put himself in acid, which means his armor class is lowered by 2. You can see I've only got 2 level 1 spell slots left. I'm just going to go with Firebolt. All helps. Concentration broken. So yeah, he's dashing. Not going to catch up this turn. Probably go for another Rare Frost, in fact. Just to keep him at bay. He's trying the same thing. So I've got to decide what's more important. Since Mermath goes very soon, I should try and... I'm going to use Sleep again. Very powerful spell. He's not going to be causing us any problems. Now let's see, what can we do? Let's get up nice and close. Looks like I can't get close with Gale. Right, yeah, this Duergar's in a very awkward position. I want to show you what happens. We do an attack from within 5 feet, even if it's a ranged attack. So we've got Firebolt here. Boom, critical hit. So you'll find that... Oh, it's this scrolling eye. Currently, when we get critical hits, cantrips do the maximum possible damage. I didn't get 4 10s, really. That didn't come naturally. It's a bug, current bug, 40 damage. This is going to be the last fight that I show in the video. And I'm going to be just trying to give you a few more tips. And before I go into the fight, I just want to talk about spell selection. I've got Gale here. Because his intelligence is only 16, maybe I should get rid of this warped headband of intellect by now. Give him a circlet of fire, that'll do. He can only prepare 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spells. It's kind of pointless having 3 level 3 spells when you've only got 2 level 2 spell slots. There is a very good argument to be made that, you know, you get more utility with having more spells. But let's have a look at these 3 spells. Because Glyph of Warding and Fireball essentially overlap. Now, Fireball does more damage, but Glyph of Warding does less damage. However, we've got all these other things we can do with it. So perhaps it isn't a good idea to have Fireball, and I want to give him another spell. I've only got 2 level 1 spells, which means my level 1 spell slots can only be used for these 2 spells, Grease and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. But that's good for level 1. As I mentioned earlier, level 1 spell slots from level 5 and above are much more about utility or control spells. If I want to do damage, my cantrips are going to be fine to use. Cantrips are okay. It's another piece of advice. You don't have to use a spell slot every single turn. If you do, you're going to take more long rests. So currently, it's fine. Do you know what? It's not much of a problem, is it? So what do I want to do instead? I don't just want to pick any random spell. I've also got to think about concentration. Because Gale has Hex, which is concentration. Tasha's Hideous Laughter is 2, and Enlarge Reduce, which is 3 concentration spells. I mean, sure, Cloud of Daggers is a great spell, but then I can't use these 3 spells at the same time. I probably don't want another concentration spell. 3 is probably enough. You might be happy to have more, and you know, that's okay. So I'm going to pick Blindness because it's not concentration, and it's a fairly good control spell. One other thing to make sure you do is cast Mage Armor at the start of the day if you're not already proficient in armor, which you might be from a feat or your race. So I'm going to start the fight and just show you a few more things. Now the next thing is positioning. It'd be a bit silly if I'm going to start this fight by placing everyone down here, because there's some high ground available. I could walk up to here, I could come up this ladder here, perhaps come up to this section up here. I'm going to take the slightly easier, quicker route, just come up onto the roof. And then we've got to pick how we're going to start this fight. And this actually comes to the next piece of advice, because I've got Wiztaff here, who's the evocation wizard. And sure, he's got Fireball. But where should we use Fireball? That might seem really obvious, but it's a bit of a waste to use Fireball on a single enemy, or any area of effect spell for that matter. Especially at level 5, because Thunder Wave, 2d8 damage. It does have the extra effects of a knockback, but if I just want to damage someone, I'm going to pick Firebolt. It's 2d10 damage against a single enemy. If I want to use a cantrip in this area, there's only one currently, Acid Splash. I think it's fairly obvious that the best way to start this fight, if we're going to do it, is with a Fireball over here. Because we can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 enemies. Now, if they're running around, go to turn-based mode. Obviously, we've got a nice advantage here in the fact that I'm not currently fighting. So I've got all the time in the world. I could actually pick Gale if I wanted to, but there's going to be a lovely Fireball. That sounds like somebody went down. Someone is... Oh, no. They ran into the fire. Okay, I'll take it. And the fight is almost over before it's begun. There's only 3 enemies left. Yeah, 3 of them have gone down. Yeah, there's not much point here in using an area of effect spell because these 3 are fairly spread out. So I want to find single target spells if I can. If I can't, what we're going to do is see if we can use a control spell instead. Let's go to control spells. So I've got Sleep. Now, I'm going to use it on Gauntlet Yaver because I've got loads of spell slots left. And I've got Lae'zel who's going to go on the same turn. I just want to point out that if I don't attack Yaver this turn, it's actually pointless because burning will wake her up. So I'm going to go and sort that out now. I'm going to get Lae'zel to go and finish Yaver off. At least that's the hope. Get a critical hit. Gone. And another piece of advice, you're playing as a party. Your wizards aren't separate from your other characters. So I use the control spell there to let someone else do all the damage. Wizards don't have to do all the damage. No character has to do all the damage. Blindness at 55% isn't that great. Not going to use Blindness. Perhaps I'll try Tasha's Hideous Laughter. 65%? Perfect. So now, like I said, we're working as a team. Get someone to Tasha's Hideous Laughter. If I hit with a melee attack, it will be a critical hit. But that's not very good, is it? What we want is a lovely quick wounds. Boom. Now, I did use level 3 spell slot. A level 1 spell slot probably would have been fine, but I kind of want to show off what we can do. Look at that, 61 damage on 10d10. And it looks like our turn is pretty much over. Flaming Fist Airless is coming, but I mean, what? She's got 13 hit points. She might heal herself. Whatever. Let's find out. I'm not really very worried. Seize Bane. Do you know what? I'm just going to use Counterspell just to show you it because I haven't used it yet. Hurry up. Boom. And she can't do anything to us. Usually I wouldn't use it there because it's 4-on-1. We're going to finish her off very quickly. And we've used the level 3 spell slot to stop a level 1 spell. But sometimes level 1 spells are very powerful. Sleep could really, really mess you up. You might think that Counterspell is a good idea. Alright, I've got Gale with the Psychic Spark. I'm going to use Magic Missile from it. Doesn't use a spell slot, and down she goes. And look at that. That was fairly easy, mostly because of Fireball at the beginning. The point is, wizards can be blasters. We can do damage. But also, don't forget, you can help your allies. Do play as a party. Don't play as 4 solo characters. So don't forget that haste doesn't have to be cast on your wizard. It can be cast on a fighter. Could be cast on a cleric if you want to. So let me know what are your favourite spells for wizards, what your favourite builds are, and any other piece of advice you would like to give to people who've made it this far and are going to read the comments. I would like to thank all of my members on the channel. Blah, 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 blah. Bryce, 3,14, Steve B, Matea, SVS, Backswiped off on you bees, Lixnix, Mark Rainbow, Mike Kanids, Brett Hughes, Samir Chodich, and Yen Cheng Chen. If you want to become a member, please do look at the description below. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.